Okay, I'm going to talk about this case, this big issue going on with Donald Trump invoking the Enemy Alien Act. He's deporting people in violations of orders. And then all these people are saying these judges don't have any authority. They can be interfering with the president, and on it goes. So I'm going to go into the specific things, the cases that his attorneys are quoting incorrectly. And you can read it with your own eyes. You don't have to take my word for it, right? Okay, so this is the brief. Okay, so they appealed. So what's going on right now, there is a class action temporarily approved in the district that this lawsuit was going on, that these Venezuelans who are being accused of being these gang members with no due process whatsoever, no right to determine whether or not they are actually people who are members of a gang, and they're saying that there's no opportunity for them to have any kind of, I'm king. Bottom line is, I have full say. What if I say somebody's a criminal and I say someone's going to be deported, then that's what it is, and this judge is interfering with my job. Yeah, no. First of all, even the Enemies Alien Act is reviewable before court. Okay? And when you classify, so they're saying, look, these people are not even subject to that Judge Boasberg, whatever his name is, district, because they don't even live there. But when you file a class action, that opens the gates. It doesn't restrict the people that are subject to that judicial review to just that district. Okay, so they filed a class action, okay, because you're basically just subjecting Venezuelans to, if they want to snatch you up and say you're a member of a gang and hide behind this shield of, oh, I can just deport you without any due process, boop-de-boo, even that is subject to review. Okay, so this is their brief. This was filed on the 15th of March. Okay, and now they're subject to this judge who he said the judge issued a temporary restraining order. Okay, so they're appealing the temporary restraining order because it's an appealable order, and they are basically wanting the upper court to say, hey, he's king. You have no say. But the way they're going about it and the cases that they're quoting, I'm going to show you they're quoting incorrectly. I'm going to break out the cases. And I'm like, are they trying to lose the case? But anyway, so here's this case right here. This is their brief before the court. And they're saying TOR is an appealable order. That's correct. Okay. And then they are quoting cases that are just so wrongly, and not only wrongly quoted, but they're actually quoting the opposite of what those cases rule. Like, let's take this case right here, for example. They're saying in Rumsfeld versus Padilla, it's saying that these claims, they're saying the only proper venue is where the detainee is being held. It says plaintiffs filed in the wrong venue and the lower court lacked authority to act on these habeas petitions because they arrested them and took them somewhere else. So they're saying, well, they should be filing in another, wherever it is they're being detained. And then they were quoting this case from 2004 saying that that's what the court ruled. Because these claims sound in habeas, the only proper venue is where the detainee is being held. Okay. So you're quoting Rumsfeld versus Patilli case. So let's break that case out, right? Okay. What they ruled is that the long arm statute gives that statute the right. Okay, so basically this is a similar case, so at least for those facts are on point. It says that Padilla was a United States citizen. He was brought to New York for detention in federal criminal custody after federal agents apprehended him while executing a material witness warrant issued by the District Court for Southern District of New York in connection with its grand jury investigation into the September 11, 2011 Al-Qaeda terrorist attacks. His motion to vacate the warrant was pending, so the president issued an order to the Secretary of Defense, Rumsfeld, to basically declare him an enemy combatant, and then said, we're going to detain him in military custody. So he was moved to a Navy brig in Charleston, South Carolina. So his counsel filed in the Southern District a habeas petition under 28 U.S.C. 2241, which was amended it alleged his military detention violates the Constitution and named his respondents the President, Secretary Melanie Marr, the Briggs commander. So the government moved to dismiss, and they argued that the commander, Marr, as Padilla's immediate custodian, was the only proper respondent. The district court lacked jurisdiction over her because she is located outside the Southern District. Okay, that's basically the same thing that they're arguing in his brief. They're outside the district, so therefore, you know. So, but what did the court do? Well, the court held that the Secretary's personal involvement in Padilla's military custody rendered him a proper respondent, and that it could assert jurisdiction over the Secretary under New York's long-arm statute, notwithstanding his absence from the district. On the merits, the court accepted the government's contention that the President does have authority as Commander-in-Chief to detain his enemy combatant citizens captured on American soil during a time of war. During a time of war. First of all, we're not under war, okay? And making an invasion with a country that we're not at war yet, that's something that's going to be argued, okay? But basically, anybody that comes in unlawfully falls under a federal regulation. But under this proclamation that he issued an executive order, he's declaring that we're being invaded. We're under an invasion, okay? Which I feel that that is a valid argument. The amount of people that has increased that are coming here to invade us and avoid ports of entry and sneak in, and just, it was happening, right? Okay, but nonetheless, so the court held that, this is what he said, that they do have jurisdiction. So quoting a case that basically said that yes, they do have jurisdiction, is the opposite of using this case, what he's doing in his brief. Anywho's, but the Second Circuit agreed that the Secretary was a proper respondent and that the Southern District had jurisdiction over the Secretary under New York's long-arm statute. So the appeals court reversed on the merits, but it said holding the President lacks authority to detain him militarily. Okay. Okay. So there's that. And we'll go back to this right here. So this is what he's saying right here. He's trying to basically expand the Enemy Aliens Act, which is where you're at war with a specific country, or there's maybe not your actual declared war, but there's a hostile invasion happening, meaning like you've got uniformed people come in. Because the reason it's saying male only, 14 and older, any male 14 and older, which is pretty much soldier age back in those days when this was, you know, created in the 1700s. You know, people were subject to being, you know, recruited into whatever militia that any country's created. So 14 and older males, does not include women, does not include, you know what I'm saying, like even younger kids, right? So basically, the people that they've deported so far that we can see has just been male. But this is what he's saying here, is he's trying to change the wording of, in two different ways he's trying to change the wording of the Enemies Alien Act. Okay? He's trying to say that it's all ages, both genders, 14 and older. It says she'll take all appropriate action to repel, repatriate, or remove any alien engaged in invasion across the southern border of the United States on or after the date of this order, whether as an exercise. So that's another thing. After the date of this order, of course, the people that were being deported were here way before the date of this order. Okay, so there's that. Or as an exercise of my delegated authority under the Constitution until I issue a finding that the invasion of the southern border has ceased. Right? Constitution, suspension of physical entry, coordination with Secretary of State and Attorney General to take appropriate actions as may be necessary to achieve the objections of this proclamation until I issue a finding that the invasion has ceased. So when you look at this brief right here, and I do agree that it was a danger, the amount of people that were just coming in. They were convoying them by the many thousands, and it was an invasion. It was rightfully called an invasion, okay? But here he says, Plaintiffs filed in the wrong venue, and the lower court lacked authority to act on this habeas petitions. But then quotes this case that's supported. I mean, he's just, this is not the right case to use because the courts. So then there's the Holder case. Okay, this is the Holder case. The Nikin versus Holder case, it says it's extraordinarily plain that the burden of removal alone cannot constitute the requisite irreparable injury. So basically what they have complained about, they're saying, hey, this judge is interfering with me. He's like, you know, this should be my say only. So he's saying, look, they have not been able to, there's no show of irreparable injury. Okay, and then complaints about the temporary restraining order. The purpose of the temporary restraining order is so that the judge can review whether or not they're, one, deportable, go through this case and have it, you know, discuss all the things that's in the case, and also to determine whether or not that their deportation, you know, that he wants them to hurry up, is going to be irreparably harmed. So he issued an order that you are not to deport anybody. There's not going to be any irreparable harm to the government to keep these people detained here, okay, until this judge has an opportunity to review the issue of irreparable harm, okay? And also, a judge can decide whether or not invasion, stating there's invasion, is even true. In fact, they've already got that. This issue about the invasion is subject to judicial court review. And he's saying that no, it's not. He literally says that in this brief, and I'll put a link in the description. He literally says that it's not reviewable by courts. It's not reviewable by courts. So if it's not reviewable by courts, but yet you're arguing in court for the courts to review whether or not it's reviewable, you see what I'm saying? It's just ridiculous what they're doing. So the court has jurisdiction to review the district's court order. Although temporary restraining orders are ordinarily not appealable, they are appealable where they are more akin to preliminary injunctive relief. If it wasn't even at all reviewable, seriously, why couldn't they just arrest the judge? If that judge was committing crimes and it's not even reviewable, blah, 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 it is reviewable. This is the judge's job. That is true here for two reasons. It says treating denial of a temporary restraining order as tantamount to denial of a preliminary injunction. The purpose of temporary restraining order is for him to review. So that is true here for two reasons. First, to the extent the district court order purports to halt a potential invocation of the EA, it works an extraordinary harm to the president's authority to declare an invasion of the United States and his inherent Article II authority to repel such an invasion and conduct foreign affairs. And then he quotes a case from 2009 that literally they argued that you cannot use it for that reason. Let's go. I'll show you the cases where this one they're arguing the guarantee clause incorrectly. Then there is the case where basically the 1942 case. So this one's 1947, and so there was a case that they were trying to argue. Let's see, it was a 1997 case, and basically there was an attorney general who was not expeditiously deporting criminals, convicted criminals. Either that wasn't allowing them to be deported, and these people they're deported are not even charged with a crime. So comparing a case where a judge ruled that, you know, they wasn't doing what they were supposed to do, and the issue was these were convicted criminals that were subject to deportation. They were convicted of a crime. They weren't just charged or accused of a crime. They were convicted of a crime. And trying to compare that to these people they just deported who are not even charged with a crime and haven't even been reviewed before a judge on whether or not they're actually even illegal. Not even allowed them to present the facts whether or not they are, you know, criminals, or are they actually members of the gang. And so that's what started the lawsuit. It's like, hey, they're just trying to say all Venezuelans are all gang members. They're just blanketing us all in one box just so they can, you know, deport us. So they filed this class action, and when you file class action, it includes everybody pretty much across the nation. So, yeah, that's why they started trying to get rid of these people. Because, I think the reason they wanted to hurry up and get rid of them is because they falsely accused, they may have just rounded people up. They don't even have any criminal, why wouldn't they allow the judge to review whether or not these people are actually members of this gang, right? They didn't even allow it. So anyways, so this case here in 1947 was the war was over, but there was still hostile people. So this this is about a case of a German who emigrated to Costa Rica in 1935 and engaged in business, never lost his German citizenship, but he was in Costa Rica. They go to Costa Rica and drag him here to the United States, okay? And so that was a time, that was somebody that we were actually at war with, or had been at war with, right? So it said the statute under which the penalty is restraining the relator pursuant to executive orders is applicable. It does not follow that the present restraint is lawful. It is, we know, for purpose of removal to Germany and not for continued internment in this country. The executive orders are a justification only insofar as they are within the statutory provisions. Subject to judicial review, guys. Okay? So, those provisions presently of prime importance are that the President is authorized to provide for the removal of those persons in situation of the relator who are not permitted to reside within the United States, refuse or neglect to depart therefrom. Now, this is another thing. It's like they didn't even give them a chance to just like depart on their own. That's what this court ruled. So this wasn't even like a ruling for me in their favor. It said it deals with the right of the public to protection in either actual or threatened time of war. We're not at war, but I do believe there is an invasion, which is an act of hostility. But the problem with the whole invasion thing is that you have people coming from so many different countries under acts of the president's invitation. So in reality, if you take it to the United States Supreme Court and you argue, was those people that came in the amount that they did for those 4 years, were they actually acting with hostility to just come in and invade our country, right? Because they knew when they were going to sneak under the fence and not go through the ports of entry that they were, basically these people they knew that they wasn't going to be held accountable. They knew they wasn't going to end up getting provided for, because that's Biden was violating the laws and not protecting us. So moving forward, once the president comes in power, then he can issue, an order saying, hey, the people now know that the president's policy is different than Biden. So if they come to our border and they try to sneak in and try to force their way in, that's going to be considered under Trump as an invasion. It wasn't under Biden, but it is under Trump. And yet they're still coming. So for the ones that are still trying to get in, it is under his policy an invasion, right? And so he does have the authority to state that, in my opinion, that we are an invasion. However, enacting something such as the Enemy Invasion Act and then saying that judges have no right to review that is a problem. And then basically telling an appeal court, hey, we don't want them to review whether or not they're going to have irreparable harm. We just want you to just say that he doesn't have any authority whatsoever. That's basically what he's doing. He just can't stand it that, these judges are like, well, we're going to review, because judges review whether or not somebody is subject to deportation. And when you're rounding up people and you're just saying they're all members of this gang, that's your word. And they have a right to say, no, I'm not a member of that gang. They just wants to destroy due process, basically. So then there's the quoting of the case about Guantanamo Bay, and they lost in that as well. Anyways, okay, so then you've got here, it says the order is reversed and the cause is remanded to the district court with directions to grant the writ unless the respondent shows within a reasonable time to be fixed by the court that the relator has refused or neglected to leave the country. So here's another case. This is a United States Supreme Court case from 1947 that they're quoting in their brief. Like, this gives them the right to say that it's not reviewable before judges, and then scream to the world that these judges are criminals. They're harassing the judges, okay? And Supreme Court Justice just today said, listen, threatening the judges is not appropriate. And if you go back and look at Justice Roberts, what he wrote back in December 2024, he said that there's an increase of harassment and misinformation spread, and it is a form of intimidation of judges, and it's an act of contempt, right? So what's going to happen is, we need the judges to rule for the things that are good for our country. But if you have a president who's continually telling these judges, you don't matter, I do what I want, and I'm not subject to you, and then you have your Secretary of Press go out and tell the world, as she did yesterday, that, well, they don't have, this judge ain't got no authority, he ain't got no authority to do this, and then today, she's a little bit tempered because she's saying, well, the planes were already gone, the written orders, we just didn't find the written order, we were advised the written order wasn't really, enforceable, okay, but what she said yesterday was that it doesn't matter if the written order was out. This judge doesn't have the authority, right? And she said that. You go back and listen to what she said yesterday and then what she said today. And they're literally telling people, so you got people all over the world, all over, on the internet going, these judges are corrupt. And they're actually inciting hatred and harassment of the justices who are just doing their job under the law, because these are subject to review, and they are. And if you don't like what the judge has done, then you appeal it, which is what he did. This is why what he did is such problematic, because look at the date that this was filed, okay? It was filed on the 15th, okay? And this is Donald Trump in his official capacity as President of the United States, defendants, appellants, because this is a lawsuit. They literally have a class action lawsuit now because he is abusing Venezuelans by pretty much without any due process just declaring that they're criminals, that they're all gang members, and then trying to invoke the Enemy Alien Act, which only governs men 14 and older, and in this brief does try to include women. And that's changing the wording of that. And the part of the reason they're doing that is because they know that is only relevant to males 14 and older, like people militarily invading, which is a hostile action. It may not be a time of war, but when they wrote that Enemy Alien Act, it's like for a time of war, or such as, like, for example, when Putin was lining up his people at the border of Ukraine, and he already had people occupying, they weren't in time of war, but when he started invading, even though it wasn't like declared war, but he was invading, right? So anybody like who was sneaking in into part of the invasion, but just to say that basically a blanket of any person who comes in that's Venezuelan that they want to tag as a gang member, it's only going to be for males 14 and older. But let me show you something. You think that only males are a part of the whole only males are a part of this gang or whatever? Let me show you. Let me find it here. What about the Barbie? Did you hear about the Barbie, this lady who was a sex trafficker, and she was detained. Here she is, right here. So she's definitely classified as a member of the gang, but she doesn't fall under, as it's worded, the Enemy Aliens Act. You would have to amend that if you're wanting to use that. Okay, so trying to invoke that for gang members coming in, basically, there's federal statutes that fall under domestic terrorism. Okay, they could be classified as domestic terrorism, but we're not at war with Venezuelans, and Venezuela is not sending these people. There's no evidence of that they're sending these people to invade us. They're just criminals on the loose, basically. Okay, so the wording of the Alien and Enemy Act is for governments who are invading us, right? So listen, let's see. As a result, Federalist-controlled Congress passed 4 laws known collectively as Alien Sedition Acts. These laws raised residency requirements for 7514. Oh, that's the wrong thing. Okay. The invasion argument. In previous litigation against the Biden administration, Texas GOP state government used the invasion argument to claim the state could adopt anti-immigration policies that might otherwise violate federal law, such as detaining, deporting undocumented immigrants whom federal law policy allowed to remain in the United States and placing buoys in the Rio Grande River, which did not succeed. Remember? These claims that the illegal migration and drug smuggling amount to an invasion are contrary to the text and original meaning of the Constitution and would have destructive implications if allowed to prevail. So remember, that went all the way to United States Supreme Court, right? So then there is the Alien Enemy Act itself. Over 2 centuries of case law interpreting it made clear just how many checks are built into the statute. Not because the statute isn't such a broad and sweeping grant of authority, but entirely because it is. Yet again, the Trump administration seized upon a policy initiative that sounds ominous to those less familiar with these details, that it will terrify especially those in vulnerable immigrant communities, and that might even lead to the removal of a small number of individuals outside of our normal immigration processes. But so long as the courts follow examples of their predecessors, we may look back on this episode as a heck of a lot more flash than we don't. So basically, it says, even if the Fifth Circuit might be more sympathetic to the invasion predatory incursion argument than any other court in the country, including the Supreme Court, the government will still bear the burden of establishing each individual detainee's membership in that gang. They still have a right to prove they're like, dude, I'm not a member of this gang. Where's your evidence I'm a member of this gang? You can't just say, okay, these people we identify that are gang members, this gang, this illegal activity, this is an invasion, this is like whatever. But you still have to prove each person is a member of that gang. If this was even to be accepted to use this is how it's going to go down. The government will still bear the burden of establishing each individual detainee's membership in the TDA. And that's what this lawsuit that's going on of this judge, he's just like, they're just trying to blanket everybody's Venezuelan. Well, we can say you're a member of this gang because you're Venezuelan and therefore you're whatever. And just taking the judges out of the picture to give them the right to say whether or not they were actually a member of that gang. If and don't forget the Guantanamo case. Don't forget that case. If that case teaches any lesson on this very specific point, is that having individual cases turn on such a showing can bog things down in a hurry. Okay? His proclamation turns the Alien Enemy Act on its head, and left unchecked, it would set an extraordinary, dangerous precedent for using self-serving and counterfactual assertions by a president as basis for short-circuiting the ordinary processes the law requires before non-citizens can be arrested, detained, and removed from the United States, and have their property seized. But the Alien Enemy Act itself, and over 2 centuries of case law interpreting it, make clear, again, just how many checks there are. But in his brief is just ridiculous. Just ridiculous. It's like, I don't know if they're grasping at straws, if they're trying to dive a case, or if they're just hoping that somebody up there in the higher court is just gonna like accept this argument. And if they accept this argument, the use of these cases, it will literally reverse what the cases actually ruled, and it can in the future. And I've seen this, oh my gosh, I don't know how many. Oh my gosh, when I was in law school, I read so many federal cases, and I saw a pattern where they would just completely misquote a case, which literally did the opposite of what they quoted it for. And then what happens is later, when that case is used again, it's used in the reverse way than it was actually ruled. Okay? And this is pretty much systematic. They do this. So I don't know if they're hoping that one of these justices are going to grasp that and allow that case that was ruled on earlier to be reversed. It's called, I call it side door shenanigans. You know, they reverse cases that have been ruled on previously by wrongfully quoting them, and then the judge, and not, instead of actually looking at the case to analyze whether or not they're on point or correctly quoting that case, they just let them use that case and quote it incorrectly. And that's corruption. And that happens sometimes. But nonetheless, the cases that are quoting are not, like this case right here. This case right here, it says, Okay, plaintiffs would not be irreparably injured by potential removal, as the Supreme Court has expressly held. And then quotes this case here. Okay, they're completely quoting that out of context. So basically they're saying, well, this court said that they would not be irreparably injured. And then talking about his auto TRO. No, the purpose of the temporary restraining order was so that he can review whether or not there will be irreparably injured, or whether or not they're even eligible to be deported, or whether or not what they're doing is a sham. Just like the other judge found when they fired thousands of veterans and lied on them. And do you want to trust a guy who goes around firing thousands of veterans who served our country honorably and then worked with perfect, 5 out of 5 perfect work record? Not one history iota of having ever done anything wrong in their job, and yet said you're unfit, your work performance is poor, and then fired them in probationary employees. And this judge is like, this is a sham. You're just trying to avoid federal regulations, and no, you can't do this. Hire them back. Like, so this is what's happening. This is what they're doing. Okay, so this judge has absolute, not only the right and authority and the jurisdiction to review if what they're doing is lawful, but the duty to do so, right? And I don't care who appointed him. The conservative justices, lined up with the non-conservative justices, are rejecting the things that Trump is doing because they're not lawful. And him going around and running their mouth and talking about justice, we're going to impeach these justices. Yeah, you've been saying it for months, but there ain't no articles of impeachment. And it ain't going to happen even if you did try to file them. Because you know what? Ain't no way Democrats are going to vote on that just so they can put a Republican. The last thing they want is for the Republicans to be able to put a Republican justice on the court. Because that's the last thing that they want. So you think there's going to be one Democrat who's going to vote to oust a judge who's simply doing his job? That's ridiculous. It's just stuff they say. It's just like the Democrats. Not one Democrat has filed any impeachment, yet they keep saying that everything Trump is doing is illegal, which some of the stuff he is doing illegal. But it's the same thing the Republicans did when Biden was in office. Oh, we're going to impeach him. They never impeached Biden. They complained about him inviting these people to come in and go ahead, you can come. Oh, I know, a few million of those snuck in and you didn't even get vetted, and we don't know what diseases you have, we don't know what crimes you have, but you can go over here and you can sit in this hotel over here that was funded. But guess who funded the housing in this one of the hotels alone in New York City was owned by Pakistan government. That's right, Pakistan government owned. Why is the president in nowhere in his proclamation he talks about things that are true, that yes, this is harmful, that they're coming in at such amount, it's making our border control non-operational, it's causing damage, and it's stressing our systems, health increase, blah 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 blah. Nowhere in here does it say that foreign governments of Pakistan, of countries that we've been at war with, the Pakistan government owns one of those hotels in New York that they were taking billions of dollars from the United States taxpayers and housing illegal criminals in the same place with people who are legitimate refugees. And that harmed those refugees, harmed them. And not one Republican put a stop to that. Okay, and then you have other people who own buildings of sanctuary cities, and these buildings, they're getting rich off of housing these people, whether through charities or for appropriations that are stolen. And the Republicans complained about it, but they never impeached him for violation of federal statutes that say Congress decides how many people can come in for refugee status. Period. End of story. And he violated so many different laws, but they didn't impeach him, nor did they take him to court to specifically argue about the statute that was violated. Okay? So the Republicans are just as much to blame as the Democrats for this whole abuse of the immigration system and the abuse of the people who came here legally. It's not fair to them. The people who are here as refugees legally, it's not fair to them. And it's certainly not right before God to allow people to come in the things that Biden did. And so, by the way, those shelters that shut down in New York, new ones have just been opened. And I don't hear a word from the Republicans. I don't hear a word from Trump saying, by the way, those shelters over there are going to shut down. It's all show, right? And so these people who are like, it's a power play. He wants to just take away the rights of the judges, because the judges decide whether or not somebody can be deported. And the judges can review whether or not a president is abusing his powers. It doesn't matter what he's invoking. It doesn't matter. That's the checks and balances of our nation, right? There's some limitations on some of the things that he can do, right, that the Supreme Court won't. But I'm telling you right now, they're saying that the Alien Act is not reviewable, and it's a lie. It's such a lie. Okay, it's a lie. But anyways, okay, so here, back this one here. Plaintiffs allege that the president will soon invoke the Alien Enemies Act to facilitate the removal of members of the notorious gang and designated FDO-TDA. They allege that the president, in his proclamation, will determine that TDA is linked to Venezuela and is itself a foreign nation or government and is perpetrating, attempting, and threatening predatory incursions, hostile actions, and irregular warfare. They further allege that the proclamation will state that all Venezuelan citizens, and see, here it is right here, all Venezuelan citizens aged 14 or older alleged to be members of the gang and who are not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents are alien enemies. And you can't do that because, as I showed you, it is specifically the text, the actual text of the Alien Enemies Act. Just look it up. You don't take my word for it. Look it up. It's male only. It's like from the 1700s. Let's find this case here, the Patilla case. Now this one was the state of California versus United States case, and they're quoting, Trump is quoting this in their brief, which is ridiculous because they're comparing people who's not even got charges on them. So look what it says right here. Holding non-reviewable the Attorney General's failure to enforce statutory obligation requiring that she shall begin any deportation proceeding as expeditiously as possible after the date of conviction. Note the word conviction of an alien. So they refused to review it, said it was not reviewable. But the difference is because they were convicted. And then you go into the details here, right? This is the state of the plaintiff's appellant state of California. State officials, Governor Pete Wilson, okay, is quoting these. Both the state of California and the state of Arizona have sought redress from what each contends are violations of constitutional and statutory rights. The claims of each of these states were consolidated for argument. The court heard the California action first. The counsel's request followed immediately by argument from the state of Arizona. Although both complaints contain similar prayers for relief, California's complaint asserts additional claims than that of the state of Arizona. Accordingly, we resolved the California case in this opinion and dispose of the Arizona case on the same grounds and order filed concurrently herewith. It says, in the complaint, California asserts various constitutional statutory claims premised on the impact of federal immigration policy on the state, particularly as it affects the state's fiscal burdens. California seeks monetary damages as well as injunctive declaratory relief under the Administrative Procedure Act. Jurisdiction has been asserted pursuant to these statutes against the United States and a number of its officials acting in their official capacities. The matter of the controversy allegedly arises under the constitutional laws of the United States. The court has jurisdiction as well. So here's what they say. This is a complaint should not be dismissed for failure to state a claim unless it appears beyond doubt that the plaintiff cannot prove no set of facts in support of his claim which would entitle him to relief. When reviewing the district court's dismissal of a complaint for failure to state a claim, the court must accept the facts alleged in the complaint is true. In its complaint, California asserts the number of permanent illegal residents in California stands at 1.7 million. 5% of the state's population, and increases by approximately 125,000 a year. This was in the 90s. It's way more than that now. California further asserts that in the fiscal year this action was initiated, it would spend nearly $2.4 billion in providing federally mandated education and healthcare benefits to illegal aliens and in incarcerating illegal aliens who commit crimes within the state. So California's complaint consists of 8 claims. In count 1 of its complaint, California asserts the United States has violated its obligation to protect the state from invasion and to guarantee its a Republican form of government under the invasion and guaranteeing clauses of Article 4 of the United States Constitution by failing to stop the intrusion of illegal aliens across the state's borders. In counts 2 and 9, California asserts the United States has violated the Guarantee Clause and the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution by requiring the state to fund emergency health care costs for illegal immigrants, which is basically what they've done for Texas, by causing the state to incur the cost of incarcerating illegal immigrants, and by causing the state to incur the cost of providing public schooling to illegal immigrants. In count 3, California seeks a declaration the Attorney General has violated because, and here's where what they ruled on, because she's not decided to reimburse the state for the costs incurred incarcerating illegal aliens out of monies available but not specifically appropriated for that purpose. Finally, counts 5 through 8, California seeks declarative injunctive relief because the Attorney General and the Commissioner of INS failed to perform the statutory duties by not conducting deportations proceedings, and here it is, immediately following the conviction of aliens eligible for deportation. Conviction, meaning failing to take into custody aliens convicted of aggravated felonies upon their release. So that's what that case was about. And so they said that's like not even reviewable. So they're trying to compare a case of people who were convicted of crimes and failed to be deported, and trying to act like these people that they just deported have never even been charged. So Trump, it's almost like he's trying to hide from the judge. Like, this would be a disaster if yet one more judge reviews evidence that they lied. Because that's what happened with the veterans. They went, this judge is like, this is a sham. These people had perfect work records, and you lied on them, and you said that they were fired for poor performance, so they couldn't even get unemployment insurance, and harmed their ability to get a future job. And said this is a sad day. So imagine now he's going to have these people review that if all these people are not even gang members. Imagine the disaster if Donald Trump had the evidence is proven that he lied on these people who just happen to be immigrants, and there's not even evidence that they're even criminal or did anything criminal. They have no evidence because they weren't even charged, right? He's just rounding them up and putting them in a gang box. Oh my gosh. Now, I'm not saying that that's what he's done, but it's quite possible that there's some of those people may not even be criminals. But I don't trust him after what he did to the freaking veterans. I mean, these veterans who have perfect work performance, and you're firing them by the thousands? If he will do that to people who served honorably for their country, willing to die for their country, imagine what he would do to people that are just like not even here legally, or maybe they are here illegally. We don't even know, right? Because a lot of Venezuelans were given refugee status, right? And we don't know. So every person, if they're affiliated with the gang, it's just like I showed you earlier, they have a right that it's going to fall under that you're going to have to prove whether or not. And he's just like, no, I'm king. What I say goes. That's his attitude. I'm king. What I say goes. I'm king. What I say goes. And he doesn't want the judges. And that's what he says. He says in the brief that it's not reviewable. And this lady, this press secretary, is telling the world that the judge ain't got no authority. He ain't got no authority. He ain't got no authority. Yeah, he does. Because if you look at the conversation between the judge that happened when he called him back in and said, what are you doing? I told you not to deport these people. What are you doing? We didn't get the written order until after the planes were all gone. Although there is accusation that a third plane had not left the ground even after the written order was released. So there was a written There was a written order, but before that, there was an oral, like an oral statement. You do not deport these. And then by the time he got it wrote up, they shipped off, the planes took off. But the order said you're to, even if they're in the air, you're to turn them around, right? So they're challenging the judge's jurisdiction, which I don't know on that one. If they're up in the air and they're not even on American soil, does he have the authority? I don't know. I think that's going to be subject to argument. I really don't know about that one. But I do know they're saying that there was a third plane was still on the ground. So this judge is like, he's going to make him prove that he did not disobey his order. So when he goes to the judge, they're not telling this judge, you don't have jurisdiction. Dude, you don't have jurisdiction. You have no jurisdiction. But that's what they're saying to everybody via his press secretary. Oh, her attitude is just so nasty. She's like the worst press secretary ever. His first term press secretary, I actually kind of liked her because she took a lot of heat, but she was graceful. She didn't have a nasty just energy on her. But this press secretary he has, I can't even stand her face. I don't want to try to be mean. She's just horrible. She just says things that are not true. She's ridiculous, which she may be ordered to say those things, but she should just get another job because a lot of the things coming out of her mouth is just ridiculous, and to say things about our judges, that these judges have no authority, boo, 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 and he's putting pictures of himself with a crown on his head as king. He wants to be king and going around joking about third terms. And they're literally trying to propose a bill to make a third term president. And that's not going to pass, right? Trying to amend that so he can have a third term. And yeah, that's not happening. But he has grandized himself into the point where he thinks he's a god. He's put golden statues and images of himself in an AI video to be like sold in Gaza and with bearded belly dancing weird he-she women as the future of Gaza. I mean, it's just bizarre, the things that he's doing. And he really has king syndrome. I am king syndrome. And I've never seen the amount of people just wanting to push for dictatorship. And they just speak in ignorance. Like, no matter, it's like, you want to talk about Trump derangement syndrome? Listen, I'm a Republican and I vote Republican, but I fully expect our judges to keep the balance of the actions of any president that's in office. Okay, I'm not ever going to just accept everything a president does. I'm going to challenge anything he does that's wrong. I'm going to commend the things that he's done that is correct, but he has personality issues, and that is he's a narcissist, in my opinion, and he basically just is. He needs to be tempered. It's just that simple. He could do a lot of good for the country, but the Republicans are just like worshiping him like he's a god, and it's scary. I've never seen the things that he's doing and just spreading lies. He has got investments in stocks of where he needs rare earths. He's bullying Greenland, saying we're just gonna go in there. We're just gonna take you. He's acting like Putin. He is bullying Canada, who's saying when they refused to be accepted as a 51st state, he started with this tariff war with them, bullying them, right? And then he is trying to demand that Ukraine surrender all the things that Russia's taken over, and just telling lies. I mean, just spewing lies, lie after lie after lie after lie. And it's all about his personal investments. They gave Elon Musk $20.7 billion promised to his SpaceX with no congressional approval, and all in this rare earths. He is invested in 8 stocks. NVIDIA and Apple are 2 of them, and those companies' value rely very heavily on the ability to access rare earths. So bullying countries who have rare earths and then lying on Ukraine to try to force and bully him into signing this agreement for the rare earths, it's all about his business investments. Business investments, business investments. And Elon Musk. Elon Musk is in desperate need for rare earths because he's got this ridiculous, demonic, serving Satan ideology that we're going to colonize planet Mars, of which is against the Bible. It's not going to happen because God's not going to allow it to happen, okay? And talk about waste of money. $20.7 billion promised to him, and then promising to buy up Tesla vehicles or whatever, and just he's getting these contracts while he's cutting other contracts. He's stealing, and then you look at the video where Donald Trump said, when the reporter asked him, are you going to cut Medicaid and Medicare, Social Security? No, listen, I've told him. I said over and over, I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to touch it. Not going to touch it. And yet they just said that they're going to cut $880 billion. And they already have started that process. And then they're going to take 80,000 employees from the VA. The VA is so short-staffed as it is. They need more money. And they're just like firing these veterans the way he did. He's not to be trusted. Okay, you have to. If you're a Republican, you are bound to God. If you want to be a Christian, call yourself a Christian, then you have the duty before God to look at everything he's doing and not just accept everything that he's doing because he's somebody that you voted for. Right? That's a sin, right? And so, anyways, this lie about shuffling them off with no checks and balances, and his claiming to this court, I'm telling you, it's like the only way that he will succeed on this appeal right here. This is the circuit court, and then it has to go to the United States Supreme Court if they, agree to accept it. Is that this judge has no authority. Now keep in mind, like I said, they're saying, well, first of all, they shouldn't have been filed in this district with this judge. They're wanting to get it out from under this judge. But the case that they're quoting, they literally ruled opposite than what they said. Okay, they said that they do have the long arm statute jurisdiction. Okay, so anyways, they can do that if you move somebody, just anyways. But the case. The case that is under this judge is lawful. And even if some higher court decides that it is in the wrong jurisdiction, it is a judicial review process that will decide that. Not Vance or Rubio or Musk or his secretary or Trump or any of them to say he has no jurisdiction. So I don't have to do what he says because he's wrong. Okay, well, you have to have another judge say that he's wrong. And they can be in contempt, right? And this judge is like, I think this judge is perplexed. I think he's like, I don't think he knows how to stop him. Like, he just kind of laughed at him. Like, so you're saying because when they first issued the order, it was only oral, and then the planes took off, and by the time the written order came out, that they were already gone. You know what I'm saying? But the judge is like, I think he doesn't feel confident enough. In reality, he should have arrested him. And people were like, there's no way. Judge can't arrest the president for criminal contempt. Yes, he can. Now, who's going to do it? That's the question. Because he's got the FBI, who's invested in his company, by the way. FBI director is invested in his company. Literally holds an officer position, director position in his company, in one of Trump's company, okay? So you have all his people invested in his company who are now a part of his cabinet and people in positions, and, so who's going to do the arresting? United States Marshals, right? And he's controlling the law enforcement agencies, okay? So I think that it's really a constitutional crisis because these judges are like, they're just like, he's just going to push it to the limit. He's just going to do this to so many judges that, at some point, these Democrats are going to have to impeach him, right? Or file specifically in courts. I think they're just perplexed. I don't think they know what to do. Either that or they're just corrupt too, because why aren't they? I've asked the Democrats who are complaining about what Trump is doing. I'm just like, I'm not a Democrat. Okay, they are constantly attacking, religious liberty and, yeah. Anyways, but I'd be an independent before I'd be a Democrat. But, they're not doing anything. The Democrats are not doing anything to stop him. Al Green got up there, he's like complaining about comments about Gaza, and I'm like, could you be a little concerned about what's happening to Americans here and the illegal acts going on here? But, I'm just like, why aren't they? Should have already started the process of impeachment. They're threatening impeachment, but then they have to get enough votes, to do that. And I think they might be waiting to the primaries when you might see a shift. But they should start it. They should start the process already. Um, I think that what the things that he's doing is illegal. And what's so crazy is, I think what's going to happen at the end of his term, he's going to try to probably fight leaving office, because he knows as soon as those Democrats get back in office, which I don't think the Republicans going to win. The way the polls are going right now, if he had an election today, he'd lose. Right, Republicans would lose. So I think that what'll happen when the Democrats get back in power, they're gonna take out Elon Musk. They're gonna charge him with so many things once they get the people in the positions of power of the law enforcement agencies. They're gonna clean house just like Trump did. The stuff he's doing now, he's gonna pay for it. Whether they get him via impeachment or criminal contempt, he's gonna pay for it. They're gonna go after his family. They're going to make sure none of those little Trumpers of his children or whatever, that they're going to go after Musk, because Musk is the one that's fighting all the Republicans, he's like demanding, saying that if any of you stand in my way, I will use my money so hard against you. Whoever wants to run against you, I'm going to make sure they win against you. Like, he's really using things to intimidate him. Right? And so Musk has violated laws. Like, they're going to get him. I'm telling you now, the stuff he's doing now, they are going to get him. They've already said in federal courts and all the way to the United States Supreme Court that the things that they've done is unlawful. And they're going to get him. I'm telling you, when the Democrats get back in power, Musk is done. They will put him and his money out of power. They will freeze his assets. You watch. Play these games. Stealing $20.7 billion. Now, SpaceX has some purpose with NASA, but that's to go to Mars and colonize Mars. Under Biden, I think he got like $2 billion, a couple, maybe $1 to $2 billion per year, but $20.7 billion promised to Elon Musk with no congressional approval whatsoever, of which $8.4 billion has been released. Oh, they gonna get him. Watch. Anyways, but for the meanwhile, people who are saying that the judges don't have any authority, yeah, well, apparently they do, because if they didn't have any authority really, what they was doing to criminal, then how come they didn't arrest them? Because what they're doing is absolutely what their job is to do. And all this intimidation and using, these false statements by his press secretary and the things that they're saying in the media, which Roberts is telling Trump, you better temper that, because you can't go around trying to intimidate justices. We're going to impeach you, and trying to incite the public against the justices, okay, who already face threats, and and threats on their life, just harassment, doxing, all kinds of stuff. Like, I'm telling you, I want the Republicans to be favored by the United States Supreme Court. Okay, I want them to win in courts, but not on things that are unlawful. And going around harassing justices is not gonna help. But I'm ashamed. I will tell you right now, I'm ashamed of the Republican Party for what they've done. For them to applaud when that kid, him using a child who survived cancer to turn away from the fact that he cut cancer research and Medicaid and Medicare. That's going to cause so many people to die. You already have so many people being denied insurance. What's that Italian guy who went and killed the CEO or whatever, the insurance company, and literally then, like, so many people in the public, like, applauded him like he was some kind of hero, which I don't agree with that, but I'm just saying, there's so many people dying. We're already a struggling healthcare system, and you're gonna cut it like that? And what about those kids who are dying of cancer, or who need treatment, who are, they're already struggling with, them causing delays or denials as it is, okay? There's so much corruption already in the healthcare system. They need more money, not less. It's like murdering. It's like genocide of poor people. And for them to stand up and applaud his lying to the American citizens to get their votes by saying over and over, I'm not going to touch it, I'm not going to touch the Medicaid, not going to touch the Medicaid, not going to touch the Medicaid, I'm not going to touch it. How many times did I say I'm not going to touch the Medicaid? Okay? And then go and attack the VA healthcare, and he just on the backs of veterans, all talking all this good stuff about the vets while he's campaigning, and then just stab him in the back and have his lawyer say, well, maybe they just weren't fit to work. I mean, and then the judge that rules, this is a sham. Y'all lied on these vets, thousands of them, all had perfect work records, and you lied on them to avoid federal regulations. This is a guy who was out of control. You all need to pray for him, you Christian Republicans, whoever you are. You need to pray for him. The devil is using him right now. He's being used by the devil. That God will temper him in his actions so that he can do good and not evil with his power. Okay? And this nonsense about trying to attack people who are standing up against the things he's doing, saying, oh, you got time deranged syndrome, and it's like, you can't call people ill because they politically don't, or they don't agree with something somebody's doing. As Christians, we have duty to stand up against wrong. And people who are just worshiping this man who has put a guy who is an atheist while he's telling the Christians that he's Christian, and then complaining, that there's a guy who is who's basically does Hail Hitler, and just so nobody misunderstood that that's exactly what it was, goes on his Twitter page and says, bet you did not see that coming, and starts making Holocaust jokes and lying and claiming Hitler never killed any Jews. I mean, just crazy stuff. And then feeling sorry for him when his stocks are tanking and his businesses are tanking and people are banning Teslas around the world and all over the country. I mean, it's just, and then using the White House lawn as a Tesla dealership, and by the way, putting our money with no congressional approval, giving contracts to Elon Musk. I mean, there's so much just outright lawlessness going on with Donald Trump, and there's people who are Republicans who are just acting so irresponsibly. And I'm telling you now, the Republicans are going to lose their positions next election, and they better rein in, and they better stand up against Trump, because I'm telling you now, you will never see a shift of positions like what is coming in the future. And I want balance of the system, and I want people who claim president this and president that everything passed is done bipartisan, meaning nothing that Biden did was on his own. The Republicans are guilty for not stopping the amount of people that came in, and that's fact. And people need to realize that those hotels that are being used for sanctuaries and all the shelters in those sanctuary cities, that people are getting rich off of housing them there. And Trump is connected to that profit. Like, he literally tried to buy one of those hotels, but his agents who manage those and broker those deals and stuff, they're selling his properties too. Why do you have all this interconnection with these people who are doing these things, right? And then you have Pakistan government. That really made me angry when I saw Pakistan government was taking my tax dollars, taking our tax dollars, and getting paid so much money to house people who came here in an illegal way, and shoving all these people who are dangerous criminals into the same environment of these people who desperately need refugee status, and basically putting all the immigrants in one box and treating them like that is so wrong. That is just so wrong, right? That's just wrong. It's so just, oh my gosh, it's just so wrong. I just wish people would just stop and think, and just, I want people to stop just being spoon-fed by what the media is, and just take time and research things and pray to God to protect your heart from being deceived by the enemy when it comes to these politicians, right? And give you the courage to stand up when they're doing insane things that are just wrong. Are you praying? Are you praying for God to guide your heart on what you're receiving that these people are doing? Are you praying for God to guide your heart on how to do your civil duty or whatever and advocate for justice? Are you praying for him to guide you and protect you from deception of the enemy?